The title of this panel is USA Staying Competitive and Providing Opportunity. In our view, one of the greatest comparative advantages of the United States is the best and the brightest and the hardest working people from all over the planet want to come to the United States and they want to contribute. And the bottom line is if we can figure out a way for them to do so in an orderly and legal way, no country in the world will ever catch us economically or militarily. So the stakes are high. And I want to thank our sponsor for this very important panel, Amazon. By the way, I started the day buying a tremendous amount of paper cups on Amazon, and I encourage you to also make purchases. So here are our esteemed panelists, and this is a fantastic group of individuals. Douglas Holtz-Eakin is a renowned economist, and he's the current president of the American Action Forum. He understands the economics of immigration as well as anyone that I know. He has a great reputation in Capitol Hill and beyond. He's a legend in the CBO area, and if I'm able to say, he was the chief economist for one of the greatest public officials to ever serve this country, Senator John McCain, when he ran for president some time ago. We have also on this panel Pearl Chang Esau, my very close friend from the great state of Arizona. Yeah, we have a great Arizona contingent. They could get a little rowdy. I'm just warning everyone. She's the CEO of Shan Strategies of Arizona. Pearl is one of the major reasons that a semiconductor called TSMC is now building a massive factory in the state of Arizona. So an expert on all things education and workforce. The only thing I hold against Pearl is that the last 2 years she beat me out for an intern I wanted to have in Texas. What hurts a lot is it's my daughter. Alex, it's true, Alex Halper, but the third time could be the charm. Alex Halper is the Senior Vice President of Government Affairs for the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry. It's a great chamber, and Alex and his team do a great job. And we have my friend, Jon Baselice, who serves as the Vice President of Immigration Policy at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Jon's helped put together probably the broadest coalition of stakeholders committed to immigration reform and border security in the country. I lost track, 500, 600, 700, who's counting, Jon, as part of the... All right, well, you'll give us an update as part of the Liberty Coalition. But where this is important is the U.S. Chamber did a phenomenal job with the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement, bringing together trade associations and businesses all across the country. And what was the end result of that? A trade agreement that passed with the greatest number of members supporting in our entire history, except for the first one with the state of Israel. And if people recall, and I think the parallel counts here, is that most people thought NAFTA and any sort of trade deal was dead. But the business community, getting to Congressman Swazi's point, coming together positively forced the issue, and the country passed a trade agreement that we could all be proud of. And finally, Andrew Kreighbaum, an immigration reporter at Bloomberg Law, will be our moderator today. So you've got a fantastic panel, and I hope that you all enjoy what we're going to learn in the next half hour or so. Thank you.
All right. Morning, everyone. So this panel's about U.S. competitiveness, but it's tough to talk about that issue without acknowledging the election results. So, Jon, when you look at the president-elect's repeated promises of mass deportations without regard, it seems like, to immigrant status, combined with personnel picks like Stephen Miller, how concerned are businesses right now about the approach to immigration and what that can mean for labor shortages in the U.S.?
You're coming in hot this morning, Andrew. Well, one, good morning, all of you. And I want to thank Jenny, Emily, and the team at the forum for inviting me to participate in the panel. So, yes, a lot of things were said on the campaign trail. And, we all lived through the first Trump administration and all of the fun that ensued. What's interesting here is I compare this year with what happened 2016, 2017. You didn't really have any tempering influences on President-elect Trump in 2016 that you do today, where you have the likes of Elon Musk and David Sachs and Bill Ackman and several other, financial services / Silicon Valley folks who have been very clear about their desires for more legal immigration. Now, the interesting thing, at least the things that I'm listening to, like you hear these changes in rhetoric, like the mass deportation now, and you hear the president talk about, or the president-elect saying, the mass deportation of criminals. Does that signal a change? I mean, am I trying to do too much in terms of tea leaf reading? Maybe. But, the folks that he trusts the most on immigration issues, he's got Tom Homan, he's got Stephen Miller, they're going to be right next to him in the White House. And they listen quite a bit to the National Border Patrol Council and the National ICE Officers Association, who they will tell you to a person, with the resources that they have and the resources that they're likely to get, they really need to set expectations in a realistic way, because if they're expecting to deport millions of people in very short order, they're likely to fail at that. That's not to say that there's not a concern about what could come, but the other thing is you also have a president-elect who, on the campaign trail, talked about stapling green cards into folks that graduate from college, and he even talked about community college too. He also talked about letting in more legal workers, lots more legal workers. So in terms of how this is all going to shake out, I remember the first Trump administration. I remember the Jared Kushner deal that never emerged. But I remember going to the White House quite a bit to discuss that. And you'd like to think that they learned the lessons of their past failures, but we're in a wait and see approach.
Gotcha.
Not to give the punt answer, but that's where we're at.
Doug, a lot of election analysis is focused on the economy, of course. Yep. The Dallas Fed, though, estimated earlier this year that recent immigration surge under the Biden administration has actually boosted the GDP by $8.9 trillion. John made a good point about acknowledging the realities of mass deportation, whether that's really possible. But even if we see a big slowdown in new arrivals of immigrants, what would that mean for economic growth going forward?
So first of all, thank you for the chance to be here today. It's a privilege. I've had the honor of working with the National Immigration Forum for a long time now. I'm now really old, and I appreciate the chance to come back every year. This is fantastic. The Trump administration has taken its mandate to produce better outcomes in the economy. I mean, that's the central tenet of his candidacy, and anyone who is arithmetically informed knows that immigration is central to that future. The demography is baked in the cake. Native-born Americans have such low fertility that in the absence of immigration, this country looks like Japan. We get very, very old, we get smaller and smaller and smaller. We lose our economic vitality, and we lose our capacity to project our values around the globe. The flip side to that is that immigration is the most powerful economic lever we can pull for the pace of future economic growth. It will dictate the pace at which the labor force grows. It'll dictate the composition of that labor force, the skills and attributes that it brings to the market. And so there's a lot of focus on short-termism. I understand that in this town, and there was a lot of payoff to the surge in 2023. People don't really quite appreciate that The Fed got a huge break with the big immigration surge. It was one of two big supply shocks that allowed them to bring prices down without really damaging the labor market at all. It was a fantastic break. And so that's fantastic. But we need to look longer than year to year and really think about using immigration as a tool of economic policy. It is the most powerful tool that we could pull.
Alex, the American Immigration Council estimated that 1 in 10 workers in interstate are foreign-born now. Can you talk about how Pennsylvania has been affected by the recent growth in immigration?
Yeah, and I also want to thank the forum for the invitation to be part of this discussion at a really critical time. And we come at this very important topic, as has already been discussed, really from a workforce perspective. I will admit, from the Pennsylvania Chamber, we were late to the game as it relates to engaging in immigration policy. I joined the PA Chamber about 13 years ago, and immigration really was not a top agenda item for us. There were proposals to require businesses to utilize the E-Verify program, and we were involved in trying to include some safe harbor protections for businesses, and that was really the extent of our engagement. We felt that it was such a challenging, could be controversial, could be a divisive issue, and because of the diverse nature of our membership, we're just reluctant to get engaged. Personally, I started my career on Capitol Hill working for our former U.S. Senator Arlen Specter. At the time, he was chair of the Judiciary Committee. Immigration policy was a topic. I started off, after college, answering the front office phone, and my goodness, the calls from my fellow Pennsylvanians about immigration, you could really, it was a formative time for me, just understanding how passionately people feel about this topic. But then about maybe 9 or 10 years ago, something happened, and we recognized we didn't have the luxury of staying on the sidelines. So we do a survey every year of Pennsylvania employers. We always ask, what are your kind of top concerns? And for decades and decades, there were 3 responses that sort of always rotated among the top 3. It was overall concerns about the economy, it was taxes on businesses, and it was healthcare costs. And we could usually assume that one of those 3 issues was going to be in that top 3 and the top concern. 10 years ago, all of a sudden, a new issue skyrocketed to the top of the concerns for Pennsylvania employers. And I'm sure most of you could guess what that top concern was: workforce. All of a sudden, we were seeing this massive shortage of labor. And all the data now coming out makes it clear why that's happening. Demographically, our population, just like it is nationally, is aging significantly. Our state recently put out data. We've had a historically small kindergarten class the last 2 years. At the same time, the fastest growing demographic by far over the next 10 years is 80 and older. So we have, at the same time, we have 66 people looking out of 100 job openings. We have 66 people in Pennsylvania looking for work. So this is, from our perspective, this is a workforce issue. We simply don't have the people to fill open positions for Pennsylvania employers, and view immigration policy as a key prong in this multi-pronged strategy of addressing workforce shortages and ultimately keeping Pennsylvania's economy moving along.
And Andrew, if I could add to Alex's great comments. In the work that we do with the Pennsylvania Chamber, it's amazing where the local chamber pressure is coming from. Think of the Greater Latrobe Chamber. You think of the Lebanon Valley Chamber. These are red areas of the state. These are not areas that are going to go for the Democrats anytime soon, but this is where the cries for workforce are the loudest.
These are places in Pennsylvania. Lebanon is not in the Middle East. This is in central Pennsylvania,
Yeah.
Lebanon. Yeah. Yeah, but you're absolutely right, and being able, and it's so gratifying being part of this group when you think about the strange bedfellows and the broad coalition, and that's something through the U.S. Chamber's leadership we are trying to create in Pennsylvania, is bringing together these unusual alliances and coalitions who 99% of the time they may disagree on public policy, but on an issue like immigration, whether it's for humanitarian purposes or for economic purposes, our interests align.
So maybe we can go from Pennsylvania to Arizona now. Pearl, as Glenn mentioned, you do a lot of work with the semiconductor industry. The passage of the CHIPS Act, maybe one of the biggest moments of bipartisan agreement in the last several years in D.C. But the industry began warning almost immediately that it didn't have enough workers to meet the goals of developing chips in the U.S. Can you describe the challenges that the industry faces bringing the workers it needs through the legal immigration system?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you so much. And I also want to thank Jenny Murray and the forum for having me. It's actually my first time here. And I just want to tell a really quick story about that, which is where I very quickly learned that anything Jenny tells me I should do. We were recently at the inauguration of Claudia Sheinbaum in Mexico City together. And we were walking through the crowds of like a million people. And Jenny went this way, and I went that way, and I got robbed, and she did not. So I definitely, I'm following that girl next time. Thankfully, we all left unscathed. Yes, I have a company called Shan Strategies, and that is the Mandarin word that means to do good, to improve. And my consulting firm focuses on helping companies achieve their social impact goals. So their people goals, their community goals, their sustainability goals. And I have been working in the semiconductor industry, as has been mentioned a lot recently. In Arizona, it's kind of the big deal going around. And I want to take a moment to just talk about the talent from a few different levels. Definitely, immigration is a key part to making sure that we have the top STEM talent from around the world. I can speak to that very personally. My father actually came to the United States on a J visa, student visa, as a part of an exchange program at UCLA for his postdoctoral fellowship after he graduated with his PhD in physics from National Jiao Tong University. He actually ended up pioneering semiconductor technology to the degree where he enabled the mass commercialization of our cell phones. So he's a great example of leading the American semiconductor industry into the future. And certainly there's going to be a lot more of that needing to happen. Moving forward in semiconductor technology and innovation, keeping America at the forefront of that is an absolutely critical priority. I think it has bipartisan support. I think with the increasing geopolitical tensions we have with China, that's going to be a key issue of this administration. I'm very interested to see what the Trump administration does with the CHIPS and Science Act. I think it's absolutely critical that all the elements stay in place and in fact are fortified. A lot of those dollars have already been allocated to the Department of Commerce and are going out as awards to companies. Those awards that are going out to companies have specific dollars with them that are dedicated to workforce development. And that workforce development is meant to support universities and their R&D to make sure that they continue to attract the best and brightest talent from all around the world. It's also going to technician development, which is a pretty big gap that we have in the United States. As many of you may know, TSMC is a pure play foundry, so all they do is make the chips. And so we need a lot of technicians, and it's not just TSMC, it's the other semiconductor companies, the supply chain, all the way up and down. We need to build programs that are going to enable more technicians, which is generally a skilled trade pathway. So we need both of those things. I think the way that we're going to get at this is, it's three things. It's continuing the R&D investments from the CHIPS and Science Act. A lot of that has not been allocated yet. So we have the National Science Foundation, we have the Department of Energy. That money has to go out. We cannot change course. And that's going to attract the best and brightest talent from around the world to our universities doing research and development and design. The second thing is that we need to invest in STEM education for our K through 12 system. We have a very large gap with other countries around the world, especially in Asia, where we are lagging behind in math and science performance, math and science education. So we need to improve our STEM education. And then the last thing involving immigrants as well is investing in the students that are already here, who are dreamers, those adults who want valid pathways into work that could be great technicians or engineers, but perhaps don't have a pathway to becoming that. I'm also here as a very proud board member of Aliento, who you'll hear from later, Reina Montoya, who's their CEO, led the grassroots effort in Arizona to pass Proposition 308 last year, which has resulted in state tuition for dreamers. 30% of dreamers have a STEM major in college, and they're graduating without an ability to work. So it is like a no-brainer to capture that population into our STEM workforce.
Got it. John, the Biden administration has actually tried to ease some hurdles for visa applicants who are working in STEM fields, AI, semiconductor, those like developing fields. And so that's been a positive you hear about from folks who work in immigration law, but when you ask them about, the last go around of the Trump administration, you just hear horror stories about navigating that visa process. I heard one attorney last week used the phrase invisible wall, just talking about all the delays, requests for evidence, et cetera. So there's these fears about mass deportation, but then also concerns about the legal immigration system just not functioning as well with this administration. So what would the impact be of a similar approach this time? How do you hope to see that moderated by some of the figures you mentioned earlier?
Another good question, Andrew. In terms of what happened, particularly, I'd say the first 2 years of Trump's first term, there were a lot of disruptions. There was a lot of uncertainty. It made it tough for companies to plan. Those are things that, if we go back down that road, we will see the same type of effect, and it's going to have a cost on companies. All these actions have costs. And, there are some folks that will be in the Trump administration who probably think that this is going to help them hire American workers to do this job, do these jobs. And look, there are some Americans out there that could probably do these jobs. Even if you went and found them, though, you're not nearly going to have enough. And a lot of this goes to, Pearl's comments on our education system not churning out enough folks that have STEM backgrounds. I'd like to think that knowing how the president-elect campaigned this time, I'd like to think that at least early on, their focus is going to be on border issues. And there's a lot that they can do that can occupy their time, where it's not going to be every gear in the H-1B program, every gear in the L1, every gear in EB 1 through 3. Let's just throw sand in it, like it was the first go-around. I'd like to think that won't be the case because of the significant support that he got from Elon Musk's, the Bill Ackmans, the David Sacks of the world. I'd like to think that has to count for something, because that wasn't around in 2016. It's here today. So that in terms of trying to navigate your supporters and making sure that you don't upset anybody, because upset people, particularly if they take to Twitter, is not a good thing for you. But I hope we can avoid the mistakes of the first term in that regard. But I mean, we got to know each other very well during COVID, And it became abundantly clear what their goal was. All right, there's a pandemic, let's try and shut immigration down completely. Well, that was bad for various and sundry reasons. And I'm hopeful that they don't do that again, because you think of the amount of resources and time and effort spent to get them to stop. The chamber led a lot of those litigation efforts. And it was costly, because a lot of folks, and not even just workers, but like CEOs at very big companies who typically never played in the immigration sandbox, all of a sudden got engaged because this now affected them.
Doug, I listened to you recently on the Moody's podcast, and you made a comment I thought was interesting about the composition of the recent influx of immigrants under Biden, how they're a lot more highly educated than previous groups of immigrants that came in under Bush or the Obama administrations. What's the significance of that for the economy, and what should the Trump administration be doing to make sure we can hold on to some of that talent?
Good question. I will answer it, but first let me just give you a pep talk. I'm an unlikely source since I'm the economist. I have no soul. There's a debate about whether it was missing at birth or surgically removed, but it's not there. I've been doing this a long time, as I mentioned. I was in the White House in 2001. We were talking to then President Fox about immigration reform. The attacks of 9/11 ended that. I was on the McCain campaign. He stood on a stage with Ted Kennedy, and half of our fundraisers got canceled overnight. We were bankrupt in July 3rd, 2007. I got laid off. 2013, we were this close. There's a lot of disappointment that comes with this territory. But the reality is that if you're at all numerically informed, if you do the math, which I spend all day doing, the irony for the Trump administration is you cannot be America first by putting immigration last. The math doesn't add up. So it's going to happen because it has to happen. And the question is, can we guide it to be the most effective immigration reform for this country? And that's the goal. And the skill composition is everything. We don't graduate enough people with STEM backgrounds. We have all sorts of gaps in the workforce at different skill levels, and they aren't all high skilled. I mean, we need people of all skills, and we need an immigration system that supports that and in a sufficient quantity to get the growth that the American people have come to expect. And we have a real growth problem. Anyone who looks at polling knows that many Americans think they will not have the opportunities their parents had. It's because we're not growing rapidly enough. And we can do things to fix that. So when I looked at like the DHS reports on the border crime, I was trying to figure out the inflation thing like everyone else. That was, this is a trendy town. A couple of years ago, the trend was be an inflation expert. That's what I did. If you looked at who was coming in, there's 25,000 Russians fleeing Putin. There are 25,000 people fleeing mainland China, Xi, and tons of Africans coming through South America, coming up, all looking to work. They're coming to work. And we need to acknowledge that and build a system that supports that, because we need the workers. And we need to have a more economically based, workforce-oriented immigration system. And that's a legal immigration reform. That's not about the border. It's not about the deportations. I have my own opinions on those things. But this is the tool that we need in America and that we can provide. And the Trump administration has every incentive to do it. They just have to realize it.
Pearl, on the education front, why can't we just train, graduate more American-born workers to fill these jobs in the semiconductor industry, for example?
Oh, well, we need to do both. We need to head in the direction of making sure that our K-12 education system, and even starting before that, is up to par. That we are encouraging more people to go into STEM careers, and that is by definition has to be more inclusive of historically underrepresented groups like women and minorities in many cases. So we do need to put more investments in that, but at the same time, that takes time. And the scale and speed at which we need STEM workers in our economy, if we're going to keep our competitive edge, especially with China, requires also bringing people in. And also maximizing the people we already have here who can't work. We have a fellow at Aliento who just graduated with a biomedical engineering degree. His brother's a mechanical engineer, can't work. So it's all three prongs, and we have to do both. And I just want to emphasize the scale and speed issue. I mean, we can invest in we do need to invest in our students, of course, and especially those who have historically not, who have experienced, an achievement gap. There's lots of students in our rural communities and our urban communities that aren't getting the education that they need to really thrive in STEM fields. We have a teacher shortage in those areas, so we need to compensate teachers better. Why would somebody go work in a classroom and make $40,000, $50,000 when they can go work in industry, right? So that's a big part of it. But we're just not going to get there fast enough. It's a short answer. So we need to kind of pull on all the levers.
Gotcha. Alex, I think Pearl mentioned there's 30% of Dreamers are pursuing a STEM major in college, and right now DACA is maybe ruled unlawful again by the Fifth Circuit. May go back to the Supreme Court. What could it mean for your state if a program like that goes away that does provide work authorization to a lot of these Dreamers, a lot of young immigrants who are pursuing high need fields?
It simply means missed opportunities. And of course, as I personally think about these issues from an individual standpoint, a humanitarian standpoint, as with immigration as part of my family history, like everyone else in this country. But when we talk about these policies with lawmakers, we really emphasize discipline in focusing on the economic impacts and the feedback that we are hearing from Pennsylvania employers, which, as we continue to emphasize this theme today and always, is workforce. And we don't really have the luxury to pick and choose how we want to write this, get the economy on the right track, and how we're going to not just fill open positions, but encourage the kind of economic growth where there are more jobs and more opportunities. I mentioned how we started rethinking our approach to workforce about 10 years ago when the feedback from Pennsylvania employers was we don't have the people. If you had told me when I joined the PA Chamber 13 years ago that we would be involved in criminal justice reform, for example, or immigration like we're talking about today, or working with the disability community to help facilitate employment for people with disabilities, I would not have believed that these would be leading issues for us because, again, I was joining the Chamber of Commerce. This was, we want to lower your taxes. We don't want a state government that over-regulates businesses, tort reform and these sort of core Chamber of Commerce issues. But again, we don't have the luxury anymore of being so selective with what we focus on and how we approach addressing workforce, because it is the challenge for advocates like us. It is the challenge of our lifetime because there's no way to achieve what we want to for Pennsylvania, for the nation, without people and the right people to do it. And that is where immigration policy is such a critical issue. We're obsessed at the PA Chamber about our demographics and how the trajectory is really dire, and we are approaching a cliff. We've come out of this chapter where Pennsylvania was, at least we felt like it, kind of the center of the political universe. You know, my kids were throwing things at the TV with all the political ads. I could not get enough of it because as well, we're all political nerds, and I just thought it was the coolest thing. And I was explaining to my kids, you know, we're in this position because we are the largest state, the most electoral college votes that are considered a swing state, with 19 electoral college votes, a significantly large amount. Anyone want to guess about 90 years ago? Think about elections back in the 1930s. How many electoral college votes Pennsylvania had back then? We have 19 today. Any guesses? 38.
Yep.
We had 38 electoral college votes. You imagine the kind of influence you have with that block of votes. But every census, we are losing people. So again, you know, our strategy is to stay focused, to match the energy on the other side. A lot of maybe we'll get into, you know, sort of strategy, but it's strange when we talk about this at the state. A lot of the folks that we're butting heads with are allies with us on every other business issue, but we can't. We try not to demonize. We don't want to villainize. We want to give people the benefit of the doubt that they are just maybe hearing the wrong things from their constituents or they're misinformed, but try to match that energy and just continue hammering this idea that if we want the Pennsylvania we all know can exist, this has to be part of the equation.
Got a few audience submitted questions. I think a lot of folks will be familiar, John, with the headline Trump said a few months ago that all international college grads should have a green card stapled to their diploma. Believe he made a similar comment back in 2016 as well. But what's stopping us from doing that?
I'm looking at Chandler over there because he's the guy who started the Staple Act way back when he worked for Jeff Flake. Look, the issue is, anytime you work on immigration, and I say this as someone who's a former Hill staffer, it always gets caught up in the border and, you know, undocumented issue vortex. So anytime you try to work on something separate apart from that, it's like, well, we can't do this because we have to do all these other issues too. I'm far away from the wood, but just virtually knocking on it, saying, like, I think that we might be finally turning a corner on that for a lot of the reasons that Doug and Pearl and Alex just cited. But to me, if you actually want to truly solve your challenges on the southwest border, you have to get serious about reforming your immigration system. That means having a lot more visas available, having different categories that actually meet companies' needs. If you are a dairy, good luck getting H-2A because there's no cow milking season. If you are a construction company, sometimes there's no seasonal need that you can show for your construction need. Tough luck, you're not going to get an H-2B in that case. We need to have those pathways created, or the ones that currently exist expanded, because we have not changed caps and quotas, how the legal immigration system operates, particularly for employers, since 1990. I'm not trying to age myself, I was 6. I was in Mrs. Leonardo's kindergarten class the last time this changed. And, you know, we're basically running on a 1990 Chevy Caprice statutory scheme. Shouldn't be surprised the car's not running so well. But if you actually had a system that allowed folks to come, the artificial visa scarcity we have created just by congressional inaction, it has created a market for transnational criminal organizations to exploit. So if you really want to be serious about solving your border challenges, you need to have more visas available for folks to come here. You basically have two systems operating in tandem. The one that Congress designed that is, there are many flaws with it, and then you have the one that's basically run by the cartels.
Doug, on that point, you know, I've reported on companies nearshoring their workers because they can't get visas. They need to keep them here. I've heard from Indian workers, you know, who think about leaving the U.S. because their kids might age out of legal status before they get a green card. You know, at what point do all these challenges with the U.S. immigration system really hurt U.S. competition, attractiveness for this foreign talent, and who do you see doing it well right now?
It's already hurting us. And you know, we survive because of our other attributes, which are manifold. But I mean, this is a self-inflicted wound, and you know, it really should have come home to roost when Canada basically said, okay, they have a stupid system, but if you've gotten through it, come over here and we'll let you stay permanently. I mean, there are lots of places where they've thought this through and are doing a much better job than the U.S. And it's very frustrating because, for example, the president-elect did in 2017 oversee this tax reform. The business tax reforms in 2017 did an amazingly good job of making the United States more tax competitive and a better place to locate your capital than other places on the globe. It was a huge improvement in the U.S. economic competitiveness. But labor goes with capital, and we haven't done the corresponding thing to have the labor be in the United States, especially at the appropriate skill grades. And so it's the missing piece. And you know, how long do you defer the gains that are there for everybody by not undertaking those reforms? That's the issue.
Pearl, if members of the incoming administration, sit down with the semiconductor industry later this year, next, to hear about what it needs to get the needed workers. What are the most like straightforward changes I guess you would hope to see either by the administration or on the Hill?
I think these gentlemen have said it. I mean, I think the caps on the visas is for the grades of workers. And it's that technician grade in particular, I think. As long as our universities continue to attract the best and brightest, I think we continue to have that demand. Why create an artificial scarcity? If the best and brightest want to come to the United States,
Right.
that's like great, right?
Yep.
That seems very much in line with, frankly, what maybe both administrations have been saying. But on the manufacturing front, if you think about what this administration has been saying about bringing manufacturing back to the United States, I think we need to think really hard about that next grade of the technician workers that are going to do the manufacturing, which is not a 4-year path. It's a 2-year path sometimes, or a credentialed path, right? So that grade of workers. We have competition too, by the way, right? Like Mexico's ready to go. And so I think we need to really pay attention to that. But overall, we need to keep up we need to keep the demand side up of people who want to come here.
Okay.
And they want to come here for lots of reasons, right? Work, but also their family and providing for a better life for their children. You know, those are all parts of it.
I don't want to beat the drum again and again and again, but I write a piece every morning for our morning email, but it's largely personal therapy. I have a deep well of frustration. And so I listened to this administration talk about how they're going to bring manufacturing back. We're not going to import this stuff. And so I do what I usually do, which is I open a spreadsheet and I do the math. And sure, you can get rid of all the imports. You need 22 million workers. Anybody know where they are? I mean, it just doesn't add up. They have to think about this.
The Semiconductor Industry Association projects, I believe it's almost 40,000 vacancies for technician roles by 2030. So again, we need to get them out of our own school system, and we need to bring some in. That's the only way we're going to get there.
John, looking at Congress, what do you see as the prospects for bipartisan legislation like the Dignity Act next year?
Well, the Dignity Act is, the bill that's basically a comprehensive immigration reform. I think there's some key pieces of reform that are missing from that, but I firmly believe in the coming Congress, if we're going to get anything done, it's got to be, a stepping stone approach or a piecemeal approach. You're not going to be able to just swallow everything in one fell swoop. And I say that with all due respect to my friends that are in Congresswoman Escobar's office and Congresswoman Salazar's office, because they're great to work with and their heart's in the right place and they have a lot of good policy ideas. But I feel like, I know the House hasn't been officially called yet, but if you're dealing with a Republican House, a Republican Senate, or Republican White House, I don't see a big bill like that moving forward in the next Congress. I just don't. You can
So
see bits of it maybe separate and apart from it. I just can't see all of that happening in one fell swoop.
So what's like that first piecemeal item you would want to see them pursue?
All I get is one. I would really like to see the America's Children Act get done. That is something that's long overdue. And I don't think anybody in 1990, when they were writing MAC 90, thought, hey, we're going to reach a point in time where Congress will have done nothing for over 3 decades. And the children of people who were legally allowed to come in here to help companies in the United States innovate, create jobs, basically help all of us. And their kids are in a awful situation where they either need to get an F1 visa to stay in school, or they need to get their own H-1B, or they just have to leave. These are people that abided by all the rules, and we're telling you, yeah, sorry, tough luck, that's awful. The other, and this is why I said all I get is one. The other bill that I'd like to see get done is, whether it's the Afghan Adjustment Act or the Fulfilling Promises to Afghan Allies Act, these are folks that fought side by side with our men and women in uniform. And we helped the Cubans after the Bay of Pigs, we helped the Vietnamese after the fall of Saigon, and to say that we're not going to do the same for the Afghans because it's politically difficult, that's just shameful. And this is something that needs to get done. And I understand, look, there are issues of Mr. Towetti, who apparently got radicalized after he arrived here. That's bad. An election day bomb plot. That's not good. The thing is, what if there's more than just one? We got to vet these people. We're not doing anything if we don't do anything. And a lot of these folks are, they love this country. They fought for us for 20 years. We got to get these folks acclimated to their new home, because this is their new home. They can't go back, because they can't go back to Afghanistan. We got to get those things done. Those to me are the 2 big priority items that I'd like to see happen.
Alex, I guess same question, but from the state level, and under a minute if you can. Comprehensive immigration reform, say it's not on the table. What's the 1 or 2 priority items employers in Pennsylvania would have next year?
Yeah, much of our engagement in immigration policy is really following the lead of the U.S. Chamber in doing what we can from a state perspective to advocate for the national policies that the U.S. Chamber has identified as priorities. And whether employers know it or not, there's an entire network of chambers of commerce at the state level, at the local level. Glenn runs the chamber in the great state of Texas, but is also a national leader in this community, all kind of pushing in one way or another. In the state legislature, how we can influence immigration policy is limited, of course. There are resolutions that get introduced to urge Congress to act. We get involved in different issues and bills that come up related. There's a lot of focus on the construction industry, for example, and efforts to related to how employees are classified, and the undercurrent for a lot of these we believe is hostility to foreign-born workers. So we call that out for what it is and try to push back. On the other side, there's legislation, just one example, that was introduced this year to create a new an office for new Pennsylvanians within Pennsylvania state government, and really just meant to be an entity within Pennsylvania state government that is helping to facilitate employment and schooling and other services and opportunities for new immigrants in Pennsylvania. We know that a lot of this work is already being done to one extent or another by nonprofits and other groups, but we really thought there was value, if only for the message that it sends, that Pennsylvania is welcoming to this community. And it was a little, it was disappointing. I guess should have been expected, but we signed on as supporters of this legislation. And I got some calls from people, what's the chamber doing? Are you, stay in your lane? And these are from friends of ours. Again, lawmakers and other advocates with whom we agree most of the time, but and I try to explain, like, what on earth could you have a problem with legislation like this? And it to me really demonstrated, and something I know I'm preaching to the choir, but we're living in this time and in this environment where such visceral reactions to anything related to immigration policy, and that's where I go back to our efforts and our messaging, which is really focused and intentional, that this is about the economy, this is about the workforce, and we cannot achieve what we want to without immigration being a part of it. So again, our ability to influence immigration policy at the state level is limited, but doing what we can to support our partners at the U.S. Chamber and other advocates to help move the ball.
All right. Well, I think that's all the time we've got. So I want to thank our panelists, and thank you to the audience for.
Thank you.